What's up? You are now listening to Americanized, a storytelling podcast where you'll hear from eclectic first and second generation Americans share their stories and real life experiences as children of immigrants. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Roslyn, and this is part one of the 3-part mini-series featuring Tamas. Tamas and I actually crossed paths on good old Reddit, where you never know who you'll encounter, and I'm grateful for our connection and for him willing to share part of his story with us. In this episode, Tamas shares his experience with what he calls his split identity, that is, being a US-born Hungarian, having to find himself between two countries. Stay tuned to hear his story. I tried to find where we connected on Reddit, but I couldn't find... I don't know if I posted something and you commented, or if you... I don't know what the interaction was.
I think I may have just sent a message.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
I saw that you had made a post about doing a podcast about the children of immigrants, and I just thought that it would be cool to connect. I didn't really expect to be on the podcast or anything. I was just curious.
Oh. Well, I'm glad it worked out. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about you?
Okay, so my name's Tamas. I was born in New York, and my parents are Hungarian. And I grew up kind of moving back and forth quite a bit between the US and Hungary. First time was when I was about 2 years old, so still very little, but my first memories are actually from the US. And so I went back with my family and essentially spent my elementary school years and my kindergarten years in Hungary. So lots of formative experiences. And I essentially became pretty much Hungarian. But then when I was around 11 years old, so the middle of 5th grade, I would say, we moved back to the US, to New Jersey. And suddenly I kind of discovered this other side of me, because my parents had always told me that I was American to some extent because I was born there. But yeah, it was quite an interesting experience trying to integrate. I eventually learned how to fit in, but also realized how I didn't fit in. Once I moved to the US when I was 11, I realized over the course of the 5 years that I was there that there were a lot of things about Americans that I really liked, that I really valued, which changed me and kind of changed my outlook on life and how I approach situations. But in certain ways, I stayed sort of an outsider. I couldn't fully integrate. So I was in this kind of in-between place. And I moved back again to Budapest when I was about 15 for high school. And I did high school in Budapest. And I then moved again for university to the US. I did my bachelor's in New York. And after that move, I was once again exposed to a whole new kind of layer of being American, because I deepened my connection to the culture of the US. I met a lot more people, just encountered a lot more diversity than I did in New Jersey. And I started to kind of reckon with the history of the country and people's experiences of it in a deeper way. And those 4 years were really, really impactful and amazing and difficult, and further kind of made me aware of just how different I was from most Americans, but at the same time, how that was in some weird way part of the American experience. And so in 2019, when I was 24, I finished my bachelor's and I moved back to Hungary and or rather to Vienna, and I've been in Europe ever since. So that's where I am right now, and still contemplating whether or not to go back.
Well, I don't know what it's like there, but I wouldn't recommend probably coming back to America. I think everyone currently is trying to flee America, but probably won't get into that. That's a really interesting experience you've had just growing up between two countries. That has to be hard to navigate, especially the teenage years and the young adult years. What contrasts can you reflect on between that transition as a younger child and then into your teenage years and then as an adult? What were those transitions like?
Well, first of all, I think when I first moved to the US as a kid, I had to learn English. Um, so even my English is kind of in this vague no man's land where my vocabulary, yeah, my ease of use is pretty much like a native speaker. And when I speak to native speakers, most people can't detect that I'm didn't grow up speaking English. But after a while, some people will pick up on some little hint of an accent or something. Even my English is somewhere in this no man's land. And so I had to learn English when I first moved back, but also just it was like an adventure in a way for me because I was going to the United States and I had, grown up with stories and movies and everything is America and everyone is always talking about America. So when I moved back, it was really like kind of entering this strange Hollywood world where, brown paper bags where they carried their lunches were real and their post boxes had little red flags on them that you could flip, and everything just felt so surreal. So it was a lot more about discovering what the US was like. Whereas the second time around, I felt like I was kind of coming back home in a way. I kind of knew what to expect, and yet I was still obviously surprised, or like my relationship, as I said, deepened, and I found out a lot more about the US than the first time around. Also because I was older and looking at things from a different perspective. So I think it's always this interaction of not just how the country has changed, but how you have changed and what part of the country you go to. There are so many, different aspects to this relationship. I think the second time around really made me realize just how big and diverse the country is and how my kind of strangeness didn't like it belonged in a way. The first time around, I changed my name to Thomas. I introduced myself to everyone as Thomas. The second time around, people around me insisted that they call me Tamas because they were like, "That's your name." And so really it was this feeling of like there is space for this weirdness, this in-betweenness or whatever, this split identity. Yeah.
That's interesting. And from what I've heard from different people and even my own experience, there is a lot more shame in the early years, and then by university or young adulthood, you become to accept who you are and use the name that you were born with instead of the Americanized version of your name. So I like that. To me, it sounds like acceptance, but what would you describe that experience as?
Yeah, it definitely has acceptance. I think I accepted just being kind of a foreigner, but also not really a foreigner, partly because I met other people like me and I understood that this was part of the immigrant experience to some extent. But what didn't settle so much, what I couldn't completely accept was just how much I didn't feel at home in the US. Like it was, because I spent so much time living in Hungary as well, just I had different expectations and different values, and I was very frustrated by how Americans saw the world at times. It felt very rigid. And, that may have to do with just the age that I was there at when university students are very sort of, they're still very idealistic and everybody's stuck in their own frame of mind. So I'm curious how I would experience it now as an adult. But generally, I still have this feeling of never quite feeling like I belong anywhere. And so I end up moving around quite a bit. It's difficult for me to choose where to settle because I really look at different places now as just offering different things and having different upsides and different downsides. And it becomes like a lot of like cultural neutrality, I guess I would describe it, like almost like if you grew up in Los Angeles or something, you're always rooting for the same sports team because you're from there. But if you move around, you realize that there's not that much of a difference between the sports teams, and it's just kind of arbitrary. It becomes a weird experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that too sometimes. Like, different places offer different things, and when we take a big step back, we're all kind of, I'm just thinking about rooting for the sports teams, we're all kind of doing similar things or living similar lives, just a different version of it.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
much so.
I wanted to do an exercise with you just to see where your mind is at with this.
All
If you
right.
close, if you close your eyes, and
Mhm.
I'll do it too, and I want to say the word home, and if you could tell me what comes to mind, what you're thinking, what you envision, or what you see when you hear the word home.
Mm. I think for me, the first image that came to mind was sort of, I wouldn't even say it's an image, it's more a feeling of stepping into my parents' house and this very specific kind of familiar feeling that came along with it, no matter where we were, because almost throughout almost all of the moves, my family was to some extent near or with me. But nowadays, I also think that home is just kind of wherever I am. That's the other feeling that comes up is um is just this connection to myself.
Mm, wow, that's pretty. I want to say that's deep. I really like that. It's not so much a physical place or even who you are with, but what you feel in yourself, I guess. No matter
Hmm.
where you are, would you say? Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a lot of comfort and security with yourself. Do you feel that way? Like, do you feel like you're finally at a place where you feel secure and comfortable with yourself?
Um, yeah, I think I've done a lot of work on myself, and I've also been through different relationships and different life situations. And I think I finally reached a point where I can no longer really look for that security and stability elsewhere. I can only find it in myself. And it was kind of like this necessary growing pains, to go through a bunch of difficult experiences, to narrow down, like, okay, if it's not here and it's not there, then the only place left for the security and confidence is in myself. And weirdly enough, this is coming at a time where my life is at peak uncertainty.
I want to snap to that because I feel like that is a hard place for people to find themselves and to feel. And I wonder if being in this group of children of immigrants and not fitting a mold or feeling like we have our people or a place to call home naturally, if that's more like ingrained in us or just comes naturally for us to kind of rely on ourselves or lean on ourselves rather than in different places or in different people even. Because we were talking a little bit earlier, and I feel like I'm also at that point, and I think other people I've talked to who are in this kin or this bubble, I think we are also. It's a lot of nuance, and I think we just understand what that means, what that feels like, and the reasoning behind it, and why that is something to kind of strive for, something that's necessary.
Yeah, I think I'm quite grateful for having gone through the instability that comes with moving around, or the instability that comes from feeling like you don't quite fit in. Although I have to add that I think for me there are other confounding factors to this feeling. I also have ADHD, so neurodivergence also adds to the feeling of not fitting in. But I think for everyone there's different little flavors of this not fitting in that come up, and I think it's nice to have to reckon with this over and over again, because it does lead you to a very stable place.
Thank you so much for listening. Hope to catch you in the next episode where you will hear part 2 of the 3-part series with Tamas. All original music produced by Stubborn Saul. Be sure to find him on all music listening platforms at STBRNSAL.